Okay, painting these poster paint marker faces, these are not the, super neat, pristine faces that we did sort of in the first two classes, if you took those two classes. These are much more grungy and messy and, really make me happy because I like that look and feel more than anything else. And you can start in a ton of different ways. When I'm just, kind of working in my art journal, I'm not real specific on how I start. For the purpose of, teaching this, I'm going to try to be a little bit more precise in where I start, but there's no guarantees. I'm going to start with a yellow, and this is a permapaque, so it's going to be a little bit less opaque than some of the other poster paint markers. And I'm just going to start with shading the face color. And I know that you're probably thinking yellow, but again, these colors blend and mix, so eventually we'll get it at least a little bit closer to a skin tone. If you're unsure of yourself, always start with the neck area because you tend to make that a little bit darker. So if you're, unsure of what you're going to do, start there. Another really great place to start when you're not positive is, and where I often start when I'm working, is the upper eyelid and the shading around the eyes, because you can get pretty dark with those as well. So I'm actually just going to start building in the shadows, and I already sort of know where all the shadows are going to go for this particular face because I've painted it several times already. But there's going to be shadowing along the sides of the face where the eyes are. There will be some shadowing on the forehead to each side. There will be shadowing over the nose, around on the tip of the nose, under the nose, onto the cheeks here and here, along the face down here on the jawline, and then under the neck, coming down here, a little bit over here, and a lot over here. So there's quite a bit of shading that we can do. So I'm just going to start by giving everywhere that I want some shading a little bit of yellow. And I'm going to put a little of that yellow all the way around the face because the face is three-dimensional and it's round. So there's always going to be a hint of shading there. And then I'm going to get a little bit over the nose and onto the nose here. And I'm actually going to put a little bit in the center there just because I know that the original photo that I drew from had some shading there. And there's quite a bit of shading up onto the actual cheek here, and there's a little bit of that here. There's some under the rounded part of the nose, and then down onto that a little bit, not a lot. If you do too much shading on that upper lip, you risk giving her a mustache, so keep that in mind. And then there's definitely some shading the lower jawline on both sides. And then we've got the neck, which is going to be shaded along both sides where the hair, on this side the hair's falling over it, and on this side it's in shadow. So we'll give it a lot over here. Under the chin, and then there's a bit here where there's shading between the rounded part of the side of the neck and what do you call that? The esophagus area down the center is kind of lightened a little bit. So that gets us started with yellow. And then I'm going to bring in actually the fluorescent red, which is going to be a little bit orangey. You can use an orange, you can use a red for this. And instead of just coloring the whole thing in like I did, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of it down, and then I'm going to use my finger and blend it out. And don't worry about getting color in the hair. We're going to fix that. Or outside of the face. So the same thing up here. I'm just going to put a little bit of it down, and then quickly, before it has a chance to really dry, I'm going to move it around and sort of kind of paint with my finger, basically. It's kind of like finger painting. And I'm just going to blend it. Blend it around. And do the same thing going down the side. I'm just kind of going over all those places where I put the yellow. I'm going to now put the red or orange, because even though it's called the fluorescent red, it kind of looks like a neon orange. And you can hear the little ball in the pen shaking. That's kind of how an indication of how, you know, quickly I'm sort of rubbing my finger over it. And you can see here that I'm picking up, you know, quite a bit of that color. And it's a mixture. I'm picking up a mixture of the two colors because I am actually blending them a bit. So then I'm just going to continue around the face. Again, just sort of bringing the idea of those colors together a bit. And here I've put the orange down even though I didn't put the yellow down. It's just going to make it a little more transparent and a little warmer. And then I'm going to do the same thing here around the cheeks. And if you have fat fingers, pads of your fingers, remember that you've got, you know, 5 different size tools there. So I kind of go down to the pinky when I'm doing smaller, tighter areas. It's not a paintbrush. It's not going to be as precise. You have to let go of a desire for perfectionism if you want to achieve this look. If you can't let go of it, then this is probably not the class for you, and I apologize because I don't do refunds on online classes. So, but if you are a perfectionist, you know, just let it go. Say to yourself that you're just going to let go and experiment for the purpose of this class. I think you'll enjoy it. And then I'm going to give a little more orange here. I just want to play with the idea of eyeshadow a little bit there. So far you can see what we've got done with just the 2 colors, and we've really kind of, you know, fleshed out some nice color in her face. Now I'm actually going to wipe that color off because I've got it on 3 of the 5 available fingers on that hand. Now I tend to blend only, for the most part, with my drawing hand. If you're really clever, you can use the other hand or use both. Now when I get really going, and I'm obviously not talking and trying to teach at the same time, I very definitely use both hands without thinking about it. So, you know, it's up to you, whatever works best for you. Now, I've got a pink permapaque, and I'm going to do her lips, but this is going to be a really pale color. And that's good because that's kind of what I want for this particular face. And then once I've got that on, I'm going to put just a little bit in the edges and sort of blend it away so that it's it's really faint right here because it kind of fades a little bit there. And I'm going to put a little of that pink in her nose. And then, of course, just kind of blend it. And you can tap with your finger. So like I'm going to put some up here in the corners of her eye, but then I'm just going to tap it. You can tap it away a little bit. And then I always try to put a little bit of pink over in the outer corner because you see that visually if you look at the face. You see it there a lot. Let's see. And then let's give her a little bit of pink for her cheeks. Really blending that one away. A little more over here. You'll notice that I'm not worried about fixing anything, and the reason for that is because the white will come into play later, and we'll be able to fix and soften everything at that point. But first, you know, let's get our color on. Now, a lot of shadows are the same basic colors as skin tone, but some shadows are actually like a cast shadow, and thus they are a little more blue. in color, or maybe a little green, a little purple, depending on your lighting and that type of thing. So I've got a light blue. I'm using the Uni Posca, but I have the exact same fluorescent. I think they call it a fluorescent blue. Yeah, Sharpie calls it a fluorescent blue. And I'm going to put some blue into the shadow under the neck over here. And again, this really needs to be blended. Otherwise, it will completely obliterate the color that you've already put down. A little bit going around the entire, under the entire chin, and then some into here. I don't want to completely cover up the colors that I've already put down, and I'm more or less just trying to deepen the shadows with the blue than I am to make them blue, if that makes sense. And because they're over a yellow and an orange, they're going to have a little bit of a green cast to them at this point. So I'm just going to finish darkening around the neck a bit. If you over apply and you over rub, you can rub it completely away. If that happens, just let it dry and then start over again. I'm going to wipe that off of my fingers and dry them really quickly. And then I'm going to come up here where I want the shadows to be the darkest around the eyes, and using my pinky, again, I'm going to blend that a little bit. And, you know, maybe do a little tapping. Sometimes tapping is better than the wiping of blending. So keep that in mind as well. And I want her to have blue eyes. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the blue in here for now. It doesn't matter if it goes over the pupil or not. And then I'm just going to kind of tap to lighten it, because I want it to be really light in the center at the bottom. Now I want a little bit of depth in a few of the shadows around the nose, specifically under the nose and in the corner over there, and then maybe just a dot or two on the top of the ball of the nose up there. And then I'm going to put some dots along her upper eyelid and then just kind of tap them to sort of smear them out. There we go. And then I just want to darken over here a little bit. You can see there I rubbed a little harder and it actually went a little bit white. Well, it's kind of hard to see, but it lightened it a great deal over there when I did that. And again, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. I want to get a little color here. So I just made a series of dots. See those? And then I'm just going to kind of tap on them repeatedly to just sort of blend them. Similar to what we would do if we had put down some dots of acrylic paint and wanted to kind of blend them. It's pointillism. No, not really. Same thing over here, just a little bit, not as much. Now I'm going to go to a darker blue, and I'm just going to use the Uni Posca. I have the same blue in the Sharpie, and I also have a version of it in the Permapaint. So I just tend to go for the Uni Poscas because those I use the most in my journal. Now I'm going to just do some dots down here under the chin, because this is the area that I really want to be nice and dark. My dots were a little sparse, so I went ahead and blended them out. I just want to really deepen the shadow down here quite a bit. And again, if you need to get precise with it, use a smaller fingertip. If not, if needed, stop and wipe your fingers to clean them off if you need to. You can really see how you can just smear and blend the color right away. This whole shoulder needs to be pretty dark. Over here it's all kind of in shadow. And then I think I'm going to get just a little bit of depth into those shadows, kind of keeping it above the eye. Sort of building that really, really dark shadow that exists usually there. A little dot of it below the nose in that little indent on the lip. There's a name for that. I know the technical name, but on the top of my head, I can't think of what it is. I'm getting really messy over here on this nostril and making a mess. So I'll probably have to fix that later. I got a little carried away. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the lips a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and wash my fingers off with my baby wipe again. Now this blue stained. It's a really dark blue. A lot of pigment in it. So it stained my fingers because they're wet and reasonably clean, and yet it's not going to come off. But again, you know, you wash a dish, take a shower, you know, normal hand washing usually gets rid of that within a day. It usually doesn't stay for long. So I want to work a little bit on her lips, and I'm actually going to use the PermaPake red because it's kind of dry. Just, you know, the nature of it, it's pretty translucent. And I want to just add some red on the top of the lip there where the pencil drawing shows you it's darker, as well as this little line that is on the indentation between the fullness of her lip. Then all along the crease, just little dots. And I'm just going to tap very lightly at these. For the most part, I'm going to leave it as applied. I did a little bit under the bottom of the lip, and this one I did smear, but very carefully so that you don't smear lip color across the face. Now I'm going to switch over to the broad tip, and I'm just going to put one swipe on the cheek, and then using my finger, just going to blend that around. Same thing over here, and I'm kind of sticking closer to the edge of the face with it. I just want to really deepen it up right there. Now her upper lip in general is, interestingly enough, is lighter on this girl than normal. By normal, what do I mean? Traditionally, you would, when you're painting a face, your upper lip is darker. But in this case, this particular case, her upper lip is a little bit larger than normal, and protrudes a little bit more, so it's a little bit lighter. So I'm going to take the fluorescent Uni Posca, and you could also use the fluorescent pink Sharpie if you have that one. And you could also use a fluorescent highlighter. Don't forget, you could use highlighters in this process as a layering medium. But I'm going to take this and I'm just going to darken the lower lip completely. Remembering to stay away from the longer edges and just stick with the rounded part. So I'll show you a close-up. I didn't drag the lower lip all the way out to the crease. I let it end here and here. It's still there, but it's if you go look in the mirror, depending on how your lips are pursed when you have your mouth closed, there tends to be a rounder part where the muscles are in the lip there and not at the side. So that's why I did that. It's kind of hard to explain that one, but now I'm going to go back to that same dark blue that I used for the shadows, and I'm going to put dark blue into her eyes at the top on each side so that there's no light blue up there. Okay, so about a little more than halfway down on each eye. You can see where I've got the dark blue there. So I've left just sort of that little semicircle at the bottom that's really light. That actually represents reflected light in the eye. I've got a black, I hope I have a black. Yeah, I have a black Uni Posca, so I'm going to get that. And I'm just going to color kind of the center of where the pupil would be, but I am not by any means being precise or exact. It's going to be hard to show you that. I was hoping I could show it to you because it would be wet. You're not trying to draw a perfectly round pupil, because when you look at someone and they've got light shining in their eyes and different things like that, you don't always see the entire pupil as one solid black color. Sometimes you'll see reflected light onto the pupil, or or actual reflections on the pupil. So don't worry about making your pupils perfectly black. And then I'm going to darken up this nostril here where I went over it unintentionally a little too much. And then for some reason in the original drawing, or at least in the printed version, this eyebrow is like really, the other eyebrow is fine, but this one's kind of blown out in that one spot. So I just added a couple little lines there to connect that. Okay, so now the magic of the white pens. I'm going to start with this one, but I'll show you all of them. I think it's important that you see them. But basically this is used as a way to blend things together and to blend the edges. So you could almost think of it as like a blending pen. If you've taken the first class with the alcohol inks and they have a blending pen, that's kind of what the white marker is. And basically I'm just going to go along the edge of anywhere that I want to blend it, put the color down, and use it to just kind of soften it. I'll do it here as a good demonstration. You don't want to come out into the areas that you've tried to intentionally leave white, because you'll just dull down the white. The natural white of your paper is always going to be brighter. So that's showing you the Pip pen. You do have to wipe the nibs off on a separate piece of paper towel. But let's find the white poster or the white uni. I don't know if there's a lot of ink in this one. You want it to be pretty juicy. Yeah, this one's nice and juicy. So I go just like around the edge and just in a really circular motion kind of blend it. There we go. That kind of gives you an idea. I've sort of overdone that one so much that it's not nice and neat anymore. This one's going to look a little better. Sort of over blended this one too many times. So wipe off if you think you've picked up any color, especially when you're doing stuff like going from pink to blue and blue to pink. It also can help to just have a separate piece of paper you can just, rub it on. And remember to check your fingers, and then basically, all you're going to do is just blend everything together using the white marker. And you don't have to do this everywhere, only in places where you feel like you need or want to soften your lines a bit. And you don't have to blend it, all of it. You can tap at it. If you've put it down and you want it exactly precisely where it is, but you just want to get a little bit of transparency, then just kind of try tapping at it. If you're moving it around with your finger and it feels like there's too much liquid, it's too liquidy, stop, wipe your finger off. You can actually kind of sort of lift it, back up like you would lift up if you had too much paint down there. That's it. That's really the trick or the secret to doing these. And the more you do it, the more it will soften and blend it. Let it dry in between applications. These stay very liquid for a long time before they really dry. So you actually, and even if you've let them dry for a long time, they'll still lift a bit when you go over them again. So I think you can start to see, I didn't blend this one, this shadow, I didn't blend this line at all, but I did this one. See how much softer it is from doing that? That's really the key to it. I'm going to try to really bring this down. Oops, sorry for that excessive, crazy jumping. So I'm just going to put that color down, and then I'm just going to smear it around. And in doing so, it's really going to soften the lines up. So do it again here. And remember, again, always keep in mind your fingers, because if you've got blue, for instance, on the end of your fingers where you've spread blue, and then you go over like a light pink, you're going to make it kind of a purpley color. So I'm going to do her neck. If you stop suddenly, I'll demonstrate it for you here. Say you stop suddenly and you end up with kind of that sort of funky mess going on. All you have to do is add more. You can add more blue. You can add more white. You can do a combination. You can just keep layering and layering until you reach the look that you wanted. Don't try to make it perfect. In this particular medium, perfect is actually kind of redundant, if you know what I'm saying. Like, trying to make it look perfect would actually take away from what makes this so special. Now, I didn't lighten the drawing down here, so it's really kind of a grayish color. I'm just going to, I think, accept that. I could, carefully put down white and let it sit and let it dry, or even get out some white paint. It's just due to when I created the scan in the original drawing, I didn't lighten it right there, but I don't think it needs to be. I think it's fine, so I'm just going to leave it like it is. Let me pull this back up. Sorry, it's going to jump a little bit. I have to do it manually. And thankfully, I didn't give you a shot of my chest in the process. All right, let's play around with hair. The reason I didn't do the hair initially, well, actually, let's get some shading into the eyes so that your eyes are a little more realistic. And I am going to go with, I think, I've got a permapique brown, so I'm going to go with that. If you don't have that, you can use a little bit of a light blue and then go over that with white, and that'll give you some shadow color. But basically, I'm just going to put some shading in where I would typically shade an eyeball. So I'm just going to kind of round the corners a bit, like so, like that. So I've put color on each side, and then I'm going to go back in with my white marker, make sure it's white. First I'm going to hit the whites of the eye and actually kind of let that dry for a second. And I'm going to take the white marker and I'm going to put it over top of where I put the shading, and then I'm just going to tap it. And I'm going to do it again and again and again. And if you use too big of a finger, then you end up having to go back and fix your eyeballs, because you, like I did, you get fingerprints in them. But I'd rather fix the eyeballs than not get the look I want in the eyes. And I'm pretty feisty about how the eyes ultimately appear. And I'm actually going to do the same thing down here on the lip. I'm just going to add a little bit of white to the balls. There's two muscles, one on each side of the lips, and then I'm just going to kind of tap it. And then I'm going to give it just a little bit of a highlight on this side of where that rounded is, and then just kind of drag my finger back. So it just kind of helps highlight that little line there. And once the eyes dry, then you can come back over it with your whites, into your whites of your eyes, and just kind of tap the end of your marker so that you're not picking up the other color and you're not blending them. and get the whites back to being whites. And I'll show you a close-up of this in just a second. Make sure if you pick up color on the end of that marker that you just kind of wipe it off somewhere. And let's put the white of the highlight kind of in the center top. And the reason for that is because of where we've got the highlight going on down at the bottom. It should be opposite of where it is. And since it's center focused here, I wanted the highlight dot to be opposite. And let's go to a dark blue. And if you need to, fix the areas where you might have gotten white that you drug in when you were doing the whites of the eyes. If you had any. If you didn't have any, awesome. I did have some, so I'm going to fix them. Okay, so I'll show you a close-up of that. So you can see what I've done with the eyes here. Hopefully all of that made sense and you understood it. You know, we'll do the other faces so you'll get some experience with it, you know, some repeated experience. Now, I love to play with hair color. I never do, you know, usually do really traditional hair color. Because you're using an opaque marker, you could easily do just like a yellow or a golden color, and you would cover up any little bits where you've gotten color because the markers are opaque. In this case, I think I'm going to go with, I'm just thinking really for a moment here. I'm going to go with red hair. I've just, for whatever reason, I'm itching to play around with red. So I've got a red Uni Posca, I've got a red Sharpie, and I've even got a red Permapaque. And I have every other version of red possible because I have both a white and a black. And I can get really crazy and add in a little bit of orange or a little bit of pink. So you have so many options when you do red. That's why I love to do red hair so much. So for the hair, I just want to be extremely messy because I think that it will go really well with this particular face. So I'm just going to start by kind of treating this like it was a pen or a paintbrush even. You know, I'm not going to think of it as a marker per se. And I'm just going to play around. I'm going to intentionally make sure I cover all the areas where I drug paint or you know, marker down when I was making the face. And then I'm just going to kind of play around. I like really wild, crazy, messy hair that doesn't even make sense always as hair. If you follow me, which I'm assuming you do if if you're taking my class, then you know how much I love crazy, wacky, messy hair. So again, I'm going to make sure that I go, without putting my arm in the marker, which I just did. I'm going to make certain I go over all the areas where I drug the shading from when I was working on the face with marker. Just, you know, get rid of them, cover them up. And then be just nice and messy with the rest of it. And because she's a redhead, I'm going to give her eyebrows just a hint of red. You don't have to cover every line or anything like that. You know, the human eye, most especially with faces, the human eye will finish it for you every time. So you know, that's one of the reasons why I say, you know, don't try so hard for perfect, because when you make this perfectly drawn face, you leave nothing for the human eye, the person who's viewing it, whether that's you or someone else. You leave nothing for them to imagine. You leave nothing for them to fill in, and that means that they tend to look for flaws. Honestly, if you present something perfect, then people automatically, when they realize that it's perfect, which happens like, you know, very, very quickly on a subconscious level, they will then start to actually look for flaws because they can't find them. Does that make sense? Whereas if you present something that's not perfect, they will look at what makes it perfect instead of looking at all the things that make it flawed. Trust me, I've proven that to myself. I've seen it happen. I've seen other artists do it to themselves, so I know that it happens. I'm going to pull this back up just a little bit more because I keep feeling like I need to move it around so that you can see, yeah, the whole thing. So now I've just switched to a different red because it should be slightly different. It might not dry different, I can't tell. But the marker nib is smaller too. And I'm just playing, and that I recommend that you try to be as playful as you can with the things that you can be really playful with. And hair is a really great thing to, you know, get crazy and be playful with because it can be anything you want it to be. So I'm going to go to that fluorescent red, which is really kind of an orange color, and I'm just going to start layering, filling in, just in general kind of having fun with it. I'm trying to keep this side a little bit lighter in color than I will the other side. These colors will, using one marker over top of another will help to blend them as well. And now I'm going to go to the pink Uni Posca. And here I'm just going to add little bits. I'm not going to be as precise. I'm going to be more precise, not as crazy as I was being. She's going to have some seriously big hair because I'm having way too much fun. Now I do have a purple permapaque, so and these are kind of dry. So I'm going to take that and just build a little bit of depth. And you can see that I don't care where that part of it is going, and I'll show you why in a minute. I just want to finish getting a little depth up there at the top of her head, and then maybe a little depth. And I have to go kind of slow because, like I said, they're a little dry. They're a little old. I want a little depth down here, and I'm using purple to get me that. Right, and then the sides of the face. Now I'm going to let that dry a little bit. It's all very wet now. There's a lot of layers of really wet. Maybe you can, yeah, see, you can see it, how shiny it is. That's how wet it is. So I'm actually going to hit this with a heat gun. I'm going to pause and hit it with a heat gun and get me a fresh cup of tea, and then I'll come back. Okay, so I went away, and I even hit it with a heat gun a little bit before I left so that I would be sure that it would be dry. And before we start, though, really fast, I want to add, I think I'm going to add a little bit of the green permapaque just into the hair a little bit, just to help a little bit with the depth and bringing the hair and the skin kind of together. And I want to fix this one section here where I've gotten off the lines a little bit and made her face shape a little bit interesting. So this will help a little bit building depth. Also, now I'm going to take the red. Where's the red that I started with? Here we go. So I'm going to take the red that I started with, and now I'm going to go back over. Again, they're opaque markers. So I'm going to go back over this area where I put the purple in and kind of disguise it a bit. So now it gets incorporated in a little more into the hair. And then I'm going to do the same thing with that green that I added. Not trying to cover anything up 100%. That's not necessarily the goal. The goal is to make layers, creating depth by creating layers and letting some of them, you know, a little bit of it show through. And then really you just, you know, want to pause and look at what you've done to see where, or if at all, you need or want to do more. So I'm going to do a little more here with the red, and again kind of incorporate that green and get the hairline back to where I want it to be. Okay. See? There we go. And now it looks a little more like there's some real depth to the hair at the part up there at the top. Maybe it looks like she needs her roots done. I particularly like the way it looks, so that's why I did it. Now I'm going to use the other red. This one's a little bit finer of a tip. I think this is their medium. No, this is their fine point. So again, I'm just going to, whoops, get a whole big pile out. Did not mean to do that. I'm just going to spread that around. I just wanted to get more paint out onto the marker, but this marker's old, and when these markers get old, they tend to do that. So I'm just going to run the marker through it like this. So it's creating visual texture in that spill of ink. And then I'll make it look a little more like hair. I'm going to kind of use it a little bit like a brush. Just sort of move that color around. Yeah, it's just going to keep pouring out paint now whenever I tap it down. So now I'm just getting big spills of marker coming out. Alright, I'm going to use the red fluorescent and smear that around because it has a wider tip on it. There we go. Just smear those puddles of color around a bit now. Since I have them, learning to just kind of go with the flow has a lot to do with how successful you'll feel with using this technique. It's definitely not something for the you know, the perfectionist in you. It's definitely something a little freer. So I'm going to go back to my favorite, which is the fluorescent Sharpie poster paint, and I might even have to let it dry. There's so much, yeah, I'm going to have to let it dry. There's so much wet marker there. So while that's kind of drying, what I'm going to do is take the white and I'm going to soften a little more some of these lines. Again, it's literally just repeating the process because it's completely dry. And if I can keep from putting my arm in the wet hair, it's just going to soften it yet again, even more. So like down here, you can see how dark that line is. You can see how well it softened it. If you're new to making faces and you're frustrated making faces with acrylic paint because you know don't quite have the relationship you eventually will have with a brush, and you know, getting a brush to do what you want, or working with all that fluid paint, this can be a really nice interim way to get really pretty, you know, painterly faces without the struggle and frustration of trying to paint with acrylic paints and brushes, and you know, if all of that is kind of new to you, or if it's old hat to you and you're bored with it, which you know happens to us a lot. We get bored with just doing the one medium all the time. This is a really fun alternative way to get a nice painterly face, you know, without using the brushes. And you can, because you're using your fingers and you're using the marker tips, you can be a lot more, a great deal more precise. I shouldn't be careful and not say things like a lot more, because that's not really very descriptive, but you can be more precise and yet still be nice and messy and painterly and still, you know, play with layering and that type of thing. You don't have to give it all up, and yet you don't have to be disappointed all the time because you haven't quite gotten there yet with your skills with paint. So I'm going to go back to that red, fluorescent red again, because the neck is just super cool with all that blue and green color that I added. It's picked up a lot of the red. Let's see if I can get it to focus. You're going to see I picked up a lot of that red. I'm just going to go with it. I'm fine with that. I'm just going to warm it up by trying to put a little bit of this warmer color in. I'm also going to do the same thing with the yellow here in just a minute. Yellow, yellow, yellow. Not that yellow. Where's the, oh, there it is. Like as if you can see the table and know where I threw the yellow, right? So I've only got the index finger left that I haven't covered up, so I'm going to wash them off really quickly. I tend to use my middle finger and my ring finger and my pinky the most, because I tend to keep the marker in my hand, so my index finger is usually still holding the marker. So I tend to use these other ones a little more often. I picked up some fuzz with the baby white there. And you might also be thinking, because this is a coated cardstock at this point, that you can't do this with just, you know, like thin copy paper. I do this on thin copy paper and my thin sketch paper all the time, because I pre-coat it or because I put paint down as an initial layer. I hesitate to say use gesso, white gesso, because that tends to be, depending on the brand, it tends to be kind of gritty. So it might not work as efficiently if you do that. So just kind of keep that in mind. I need to get, I don't actually have an orange. The only thing I have is this. I just feel like it's not orangey enough. I'm going to be moving this all around. So I'm not trying to make it the same color as her hair, I swear. I'm not. Okay, so now I'm going to put some white down, and then I'm just going to blend it all together. Since I have those initial original layers, some of that still shows up, so I'm not completely obliterating it, but I am definitely kind of merging these together. I'm really pushing the amount of fluid that's in the markers at this point. I'm going to clean that nib off and try to switch to the white one, the white Uni Posca, because it probably has a little more ink at the edge. All right, I'm kind of just sort of pushing it. The paper's too wet at this point. I've got too much wet marker down. So I'm just going to stop very soon. All right, I need to just let that dry, because now it's just become an orange mess. I'm going to do a little bit of touch up while we wait for that to dry. I'm going to do a little touch up here where I dragged some white onto the hair. Okay. And then I'm really done with it, except I need to lighten this down here, but I have so much wet marker on there that it's not going to do it. And let's see. I kind of don't want to, you know, pause and hit it with the heat gun. That's probably what I'm going to end up having to do. And let's see if I can get some white ink out. I'm going to do it over here because I don't want a big pool of it in the middle of my drawing or painting. I'm doing this, I'm trying to be a little bit lighter of a touch, trying to not pick up so much orange, which is what happens. It's just picking it up from the layers underneath, basically, because they're so wet still. I'm just going to consider it done here. I'm going to consider this done. Had I lightened that originally and not left it dark, I wouldn't have had to have gone through so much of that. But I left the scan dark. So if you run into issues, don't worry about it with that, because you won't have that with your regular drawings. Hopefully you won't have a place that's that dark. So that's it. That's our first face done with the poster paint markers, and I think you can probably see why I love it so much. The colors are rich and vibrant. There is a lot of depth, a lot of layering, and a lot of visual texture. They look like paintings. If you don't tell anyone that you did it with a marker, whoops, I guarantee you they won't know, because I am you know, I'm asked about it, and people, when I tell people that I've used a marker to do it, they're shocked, you know, by that knowledge, because they didn't expect that. When they looked at it, they saw a painted face, not a marker drawn face. So that's it for this one. I hope that you had fun, you enjoyed it, and please, please, please practice, practice, practice before you say it's not for you, because it's not necessarily the easiest technique to get down, but once you have it, you'll always have it, and you can really have a lot of fun playing around with this. So next up will be, the next video will be using the same exact process that we've already used, but using it in a more realistic format, the way that you more typically probably would in your art journal, because you would, you know, more than likely be working over multiple different types of medium here. So we have some spray ink, we have some acrylic paint, and we have freshly drawn the faces with pencil instead of something that, you know, was printed. So I'll see you in a minute in the next video.